welcome to Spectrum TV. I'm Karen Tui Boys, your host, and I am super excited to have Sally Foley-Lewis with us today. And before I let her speak and before we get right into it, I want to just welcome you all. And in the chat, it would be great if you can tell us where you're from, where you're listening from, because I know we have a wonderful global audience, and it's always lovely to know where you're from. And if you haven't met me before, I am a champion for lifelong learning, and I am just passionate about teachers, parents, and students being the best that they can be. And so Spectrum TV was born from lockdown in New Zealand in March, when I was in isolation by myself for 6 weeks. Long story, but it was an exciting time, and I just wanted to help people. So this is season 2, and so I'm excited to be able to share this with you and to share my amazing, wonderful friend, Sally Foley-Lewis, who spoke at our live conference in January, and then she spoke at our Teachers Matter online summit in July. And so welcome, Sally.
Hi, Karen. Hi. And it's just, I love hanging out with you because we get to talk all about the good stuff that we are both passionate about. And I just want to say up front, I have the hiccups, so I apologize. I haven't been drinking. I just managed to get the hiccups, but I think we've got them in check now.
Good, good. So we won't mind hiccup. We all get the hiccups at times. And Danielle is listening in from Melbourne, Australia. So hi, Danielle. Let us know where you're from in the chat so that we know. And Sally is based in Brisbane. So she came and stayed with me a while ago. Must have been before lockdown, a while ago. But one of the things she left with me was her wonderful book here, The Productive Leader. And she's obsessed with productivity, self-leadership. And I was really proud just before lockdown to be at the Professional Speakers Australia conference convention. And she was named 2020 Breakthrough Speaker of the Year. So woohoo!
Yay! Here's an award for speaking. Now you won't be speaking on a stage for a long time. Oh, the irony.
A bit of irony in that.
Yeah. Hi, Helen. And Danielle, you're in Melbourne. My heart goes out to you. You're, Melbourne and Vic suffering the most at the moment when it comes to lockdown. So thinking of you, and hopefully things will improve for you.
And
hi, Helen.
Hi, Helen. We've just been running a parent summit this weekend we've just had, and lots of parents from America. And again, they are suffering too, and many other countries as well. So finding it quite challenging. But today we're going to really talk about this whole idea of resilience and relationships in relation to this being a leader. And whether you're a leader with a title or a leader without a title, whether you lead your family as a parent, whether you lead an organization, whether you're in a school and you're leading a class, or you're part of a syndicate, or you're the leader of a school, we all have leadership roles in some way. So let's start up, Sally, by telling our audience, what's your take on resilience?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And I have to absolutely agree with you. Leadership is a behaviour. And so when it comes to understanding what resilience is for leaders in education, I think it's, first and foremost, I'm not a teacher. I don't have that educational background. But what I have found, and one of the things that when I look and listen to teachers, is how exceptionally well they are helping the students and the children to be resilient. And I'm wondering, there are takeaways in what they're doing that can be applied for themselves and for their parents and for their colleagues in classrooms and in agencies. And there's a lot of talk, I think, that grit is about resilience, and I actually don't think it is. I'm currently going through this transition at the moment where coping skills is what resilience is about, and coping skills includes reaching out and getting help. Not all of us are born with the skills to cope with what's going to come our way. Let's face it, not all of us were born with the skills to handle COVID. So grit is, I'm not too sure if it's high on my list anymore, as opposed to resilience being able to find the resources, and that's either within or amongst a community or in a professional context, and being able to utilize those resources and being open. So that's where an emotional intelligence, that self-awareness, and that willingness to be able to step up and say, hey, I need help.
So that resilience is those coping strategies. And I'd agree, because I think Angela Duckworth would say that grit is about perseverance and
Mm,
passion. So
mm,
that it's about having something you're very passionate about to be able to
mm,
persevere on.
mm.
So when it gets hard, maybe then that's when you pull up that resilience of those coping strategies. So I tend to agree with you. Probably slightly different things, but also have
Yeah.
an intertwining factor as well.
Well, I've heard them being used interchangeably, and I guess that's where I'm getting this. I really want to make sure we get clear on these definitions, and there's always going to be someone's take on it as well, based on their experience too.
Yes, I totally
Mm,
agree. So
mm.
tell us what leaders can do to sustain this resilience in themselves and others, particularly when it's a tough time right now.
Yeah, so I have the 5 L's that I rely on. I'm big on finding words that have the same letter or there's rhyming, because I'm a simple girl. I like to make it easy for me to remember. And so I have the 5 L's. And the first one is to link. And what I mean by that is, who haven't you connected with? Who have you got to catch up with? Sometimes when we're going through a tough time, we let people go, as in we withdraw and we think, oh, I'll catch up with them later. I don't have the energy. But when we do catch up, we're actually re-energized from the
Mm.
connection. So who do we need to stay linked to? Another one is lend. And this is where I think, when we are in service of others, so giving a hand, lending a hand, it gets us out of our own head and puts us in that feeling of altruism, and that feeling of being able to be helpful to others is really valuable. The third one is limber. And this is where, what are we doing to look after ourselves physically, emotionally, and even intellectually? So limbering up and staying, not just physically fit, but match fit for any sort of change or prolonged uncertainty that's coming our way, so that we are resilient. And the fourth L is to look. And this is where I think it's a really overlooked, pun intended, strategy. And this is looking around and being more observant. What's happening around you, whether it's in your school, in your community, on your way to school, is what's happening in the meeting rooms, what's going on that's a little bit different to the usual. Sometimes we can get so stuck in and head down on what we're doing that we miss out on things. And there's a lot of research about, young people with their heads in their mobile phones missing major things going on in front of them. But it's in that vein, like, don't miss out by not being more observant. And the last L is learn. So you and I are both passionate about being lifelong learners. So what is it that we could learn more about? Is it about resilience? Is it about our own emotional intelligence? Or is it just rekindling an old hobby so that we bring back some more joy and recreation during tough times to help us stay resilient? So they're my 5 L's.
I love those. And it occurs to me that look is also, when you're looking around, is about grounding yourself as well.
Yeah.
Just to be able to feel like, hey, there's some groundedness of who I am, what I need to be, where I need to go. So you're looking around others as well. So I love
Absolutely.
those.
Oh,
So
good.
tell us about, there are leaders who are totally task focused and there are leaders who are people focused, and
Mm.
in between, of course. So why is relationships and resilience so important when you've got such clear outcomes as a leader? You want to get things done.
One of the things I've learned over the years when I've worked with organisations, and more organisations than I have with schools, but I think the example lends itself, because whenever there's crisis, the speed with which the organisation gets through the crisis is directly correlated to how strong the relationships are within the team. So just imagine when a crisis hits and you turn the lights on like cockroaches scattering to all the dark corners. If a crisis hits and everyone just automatically gets up and leaves because they go into panic mode, they're worried about themselves, they don't care about the organization, they just want to go to safe waters. Well, that is a sign to me that there's not a lot of relationship, which means there's not a lot of loyalty. There's not a lot of preparedness to put skin in the game and strategize and find a way through a crisis in order to be resilient. Whereas if you flip it around and you say, well, we've got a really good relationship going on amongst the team, as a leader, even if you're task focused, some effort towards building relationships is going to go a long way to strengthening that team. If, and it's not if anymore, is it? But when something happens and resilience needs to step up, and you also want the team to be prepared to step in. So that's where I think it's so critical. That's where it really shows up that relationships are essential.
I've been in a school where tragedy hit, and as a young teacher that I was then, that's the thing that really kept us going. Everybody, no one slept by them, by themselves. I don't mean that by the way it sounds. Nobody slept. Was alone the night that it happened. Everyone was looked after. We didn't. There was one teacher who we knew her husband was away, so she wasn't alerted till the next morning. So two of us went round to make sure she knew, and but the relationships that had already been built made it so much easier for us to be able to cope with what was actually quite horrific experience. So I totally have experienced that from the other side as well.
Yeah, and I think when you've got a leader who is very task focused, and there's a little bit of, do I have to socialize with them? Well, stop thinking of it like that. Maybe it's a strategy of actually getting to know your people. You might actually like some of them. Just being a bit cheeky there. But here's the thing. I get that when you observe it over there happening, it looks like people are just socializing. And it is, and it's important.
It's getting to know them. I remember years ago, like it would be 25 years ago, when I first started my business, and my hairdresser had a very, very successful hairdressing business. And she said to me, "Your employees are not your friends." And for a wee while, I lived with that philosophy. But then I realized actually I was missing out and they were missing out, because that wasn't my personality. She was like, you don't invite them to your home. But I'd grown up in a family where my dad was a business owner, and we had barbecues at our house all the time. And, everyone would come, and not just as employees, but, the community. And it was wonderful to really connect with those people. And so I really had to shift. And some of you are laughing, going, you're taking advice from your hairdresser. But I want to say that she was a really highly successful businesswoman. So I was taking it from that perspective. But I had to really think through those choices.
Yeah. I think people, lots of people who we like and admire and are very, very clever will still give us wrong advice, because it's all contextual. And there's also this whole context of having those sorts of relationships. There's also a cultural element to this. Yes, I'm sitting in Australia and we are an incredibly egalitarian country. I call my boss by their first name. We will go out socializing. That is not the same in every country. And so it has to be put into context. And whatever you can do, whether you are the leader of a school or you're an administrator in a school or a teacher, whatever you can do, and don't just wait for the position of a leader to do this. It's the leadership behavior. Do something that can help increase the relationship with others. Because you will always be better off in the long run. We've got a question. Do we want to wait for questions at the end or just keep going?
Yeah, so I know that Lisa's asked if you could expand on that limber a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So limber is all about your physical well-being. And I'm not a doctor, so, make sure you are looking after you physically, making sure that you're doing everything that you can possibly do to make sure that you're able to help you and your people through any sort of uncertainty, so that you can stay resilient. Our physical well-being, our mental well-being, and emotional well-being are so critical. As basic as it might be drink a little less alcohol, drink a lot more water, do some breathing, do some grounding, make sure you're getting to bed as early as you can and getting good sleep. And then whatever your exercise regime is. I know that when the first early parts of COVID hitting, and I was doing a lot of drop-ins with organizations, and I was talking to the leaders in these organizations, and I was asking them, so how is your time management going? What are you doing with your time? And they said, oh, well, I'm starting a lot earlier and I'm staying a lot later. And I said, so how did you normally go to work? or to your, your place of work? Oh, I would drive. So how long is that commute? Oh, it's about 45 minutes. Take back that 45 minutes and give it to yourself, because it was yours anyway. The commute is still yours, even though it probably back in the pre-COVID days, it didn't feel like it was yours. It's yours, So
Yeah,
if it's 45 minutes or even 20 minutes to walk to school or to drive to the school or your place of work, then it's about making sure that you use that time for you. And it could be, especially if you're back in a lockdown and everyone's back at home, that 20 minutes might be setting everyone up to be okay in the home and to get started. It's your time.
So that reminds me that, of course, my drive time is my learn time. So that's one of your other L's. So I have audiobooks playing in the car all the time, and I know you're the same. So it's amazing how quick you can listen to a book when you're driving. And so it's great. So trust seems to underpin a lot of this. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, what's the anti-model to this when there's no trust? That's the thing that when I think about how important trust is, then imagine if we didn't have trust. Go back to the previous situation I was talking about, that if a crisis hits and everyone leaves, that tells you there's no trust. That tells you that no one, that everyone's just looking out for themselves. And that is an absolute direct line relationship to the culture of the organization, which is about relationships as well. So, when there's not enough trust, there will not be a relationship, and there will not be preparedness to be resilient and hang in there and share coping mechanisms with the team and help to raise and lift everyone up, or even be prepared to hold the space for others. If I don't trust someone, it's really hard to sit here and be present and hold a space for them when I don't feel even maybe a little bit emotionally safe with them. If I do this, what's going to happen? When, no trust is icky, isn't it?
Absolutely. So how do we build trust as a leader?
Yeah. So icky is a technical term, by the way.
I love it.
See, I think trust is one of these things. Sometimes it's hard to define, but it's like you don't hear the wind unless you hear it moving through the trees, and the leaves are what make you hear the wind. And so trust, to me, is present when people they're demonstrating their integrity. They have integrity. They're being consistent. So nothing worse than a leader who has really inconsistent decision making, and that leads to, well, I don't trust what they're going to say. So consistency is important. How reliable are you as a leader? Can I rely on you, and therefore can I trust you? Are you going to show up? Are you going to say yes to this like you said you would? And how sincere are you? I mean, we can smell it a mile away, really, can't we? We're humans, and we've got that ability to say, yeah, no. So sincerity is really important, and even fake sincerity is easy to see. And commitment, how committed are you as a leader to the team and to this relationship, so that trust is there? I think those are the elements that absolutely indicate that trust is present. And working on your integrity, your commitment, your consistency, and your reliability, and being sincere are some of the things that you can do to build trust. And another element to this is, if you want people to trust you, then you also need to trust them. And I think there's a big reciprocity that goes with that.
Yes, because if you've got a team and you've asked them to do a task, you can't be micromanaging and asking them every 2 seconds, have you done it, where you at, what's happening?
Yeah, that's fun. Everybody loves a micromanager.
No. So that's about being able to not only be trustworthy, but also to trust others as well.
Definitely. Yeah. And you can talk about trust openly. I think we as humans are at a space right now that we can start talking about trust. And I think what's the woke leader, isn't that a term? But I think a leader who has got a level of emotional intelligence is able to sit down with someone and say, I want to know what trust means to you. And how can we show that up, and how can I show up for you in something specific, and maybe go through commitment, consistency, reliability, and just check those things if you don't actually want to use the T word of trust. So
I actually quite like that. It's asking them how will this work? So
mm,
it's not just assuming, but I guess you're saying, what do you need from me as your leader, or as your person who's got accountable for what you're doing? What do
mm,
you need from me to ensure?
absolutely. And I think leaders have this pressure on them that because the team looks to them for guidance and decisions, and it makes sense that then they would say, well, I need to have all the answers. And in actual fact, that's not true 100% of the time. So when a leader says things like, what does trust look like to you in this organization? What would trust, or what does commitment and consistency and reliability mean to you? And also going back to the micromanagement kind of point about when you delegate to someone, one of the best things you can do when you're setting up that delegation is to say to someone, what can I do, or how do you want me to help you stay accountable to this? And then all of a sudden that person thinks, oh, I got to do this. And, and because it might be a bit new, but the flip of that means, oh, I don't have to get scolded every week whip meeting that I have to attend to. I can actually tell you how I want help.
Mm.
And so as a leader, you don't have to mind read and get into the crystal ball and think about these things. You're actually, getting people to participate at a deeper level.
Yeah, and Helen says micromanaging is diabolically bad for morale, which of course it is, because if someone's always on you, have you done it? Have you done it? Have you done it? And those of you who are at the parenting summit, I'm just reflecting on my daughter and her vacuum cleaning because she hasn't done it this week, and I'm now just going, I've said it about 3 times in the last 3 days. When are you going to get it done? So I need to go back and watch the advice that Justin gave me, and the second one is to ask how does she need me to keep her accountable.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's rather than me being the naggy mum.
And what's the barrier? What's the barrier to doing the vacuum cleaning? Or what's that there's a cheeky NLP, neuro-linguistic programming thing about when would now be a good time to do the
We use
vacuum?
that in our house all the time. It would now be great.
But absolutely, Helen, no one I'm yet to meet any person who likes micromanaging from their boss. So absolutely diabolical. Yeah,
I think so.
yeah.
So boundaries are important for both relationships and resilience. So
Mm.
how does holding a boundary really help us in both of those?
Yeah, I love Brene Brown's quote about clear is kind. When you hold that boundary, you're teaching people how to treat you, which means it's a formulation around this is how our relationship is actually going to work from my standpoint. And you need to also be prepared about what their boundaries are too. But I think that's where it comes into play to help you be really clear about the relationships you're going to have, what you will and won't do. And then when things get tough and you do need to pull into some resilience and coping strategies, those boundaries will have served you well if you've been
Mm.
consistent with them.
So how does a leader set those boundaries then?
Yeah, I think one of the things is really important is to understand that it's okay to say no. When you say no, that does not equal I've stopped loving you, I've stopped caring for you, or I've stopped leading you as a team. Those two are not connected.
Mm.
No means no to this context right now. And the other thing around boundaries when you set them is we've got to remember that not everyone's going to like that. But the reality is not everyone's going to like us anyway. And when we get over that, we're going to be pretty okay. We've just got to remember, we don't like some people. So the reverse is true. Some people are just not going to like us. Therefore, when we set a boundary, people are not going to like it. However, in the saying the no or setting the boundary, I do believe we can be helpful. And as an example of that, instead of just saying no and pulling a face like I just did, maybe we could just say no and have you tried this? No, but I could do it later. So it's being no and helpful. No and a bit of advice. No and a redirection, but a helpful redirection. I think just a simple no just makes us look passive aggressive or aggressive, whereas no as a way of setting a boundary is really important. And being consistent. If we're not consistent with our boundaries, then we're actually coming back to the trust issue. We're also coming back to teaching people how to treat us. Well, I'll keep asking because sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. It's like gambling. Why do we keep going? Why do people keep pushing that button at the gambling? Because every now and again it says yes. And so that's that pull in. And I think also one of the other things about setting a boundary is sometimes you will have to concede and say, okay, I need to break this boundary. What's really important is that this is an exception, not the norm, because I understand how important this is right now. I will do this time, and I'm willing to help you, but please do not make this a normal business or a normal situation.
I'm just thinking I've got one daughter that if I did that, she'd take it as far as she could.
Yeah, well, you've got to learn and just let her try it.
Yeah.
You know, if we're talking about the vacuuming again.
No, different daughter. I've got 2 extra daughters since lockdown, so since you came and stayed here. So
Okay.
yeah, no, that's great. As we finish up, Sally, any other final words you want to add about this whole resilience, relationship, leadership?
I really believe right now, now more than ever, we need to just slow it down a bit. You know, we've COVID hit and we pivoted, word of the year, pivot. But we had to react in order to make sure everyone was safe. And then we had to spin the wheels to get everyone back as productive as possible. Just breathe. Just take a moment, take your leave. Don't put off taking your own recreation leave or whatever it is. And when the holidays come for schools, make sure there's some real downtime for you. But also, I think, remember to be kind to yourself, because what I truly am learning, even for my own emotional intelligence, my own growth, because I am a lifelong learner, when I am more kind to me, it's actually easier to be kinder to others. And even though I'm considered a giver and I'm better at giving than I am at asking for help, but it's interesting that as I've learned to be more kind to myself, I'm better at asking, I'm more clear in asking, and I'm holding boundaries, and I'm kinder to others, and I'm allowing others to help because it's the gift that they can give me.
I so concur. I think that being kind to yourself is not just, oh yeah, I'll be kind and I'll eat more chocolate, or I'll be well, let's just go out for dinner because then I don't have to go, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think what you're talking about, and people get confused about this, how to be kind and the self-care is being clear on your own boundaries, being clear, and it's about leading yourself and having that discipline to say, hey, I'm important. This is what I need to take that time. I love your idea about that 45 minutes. If that was your drive time, what are you going to do in that time that you can be kind to yourself now?
And it's the 5 L's.
And the 5 L's, yeah.
Yeah.
How can you use those 5 L's to be able to be the best that you can be? So
absolutely.
Sally, as always, a wonderful, stunning conversation with you. Thank you so much. And I know it's sort of mid-afternoon for you in Brisbane, as we are in daylight saving here, but you guys don't do that. So it's always a little more tricky on the time zones, but I really appreciate your time this afternoon. And
blast with you, so thank you.
Thank you. And I always know to wear red when I'm talking to Sally, because she always has a splash of red somewhere so we can match. It's always great. So she's even got her hat. Wonderful. I need one of those. I'd have to have multi-coloured ones, rainbow ones. To our wonderful viewers, look, thank you so much for tuning into yet another episode. We have the amazing, and Sally's going to concur with this, the amazing Lisa McGuinness-Smith next week. I know, see, look at Sally's face. And she has single-handedly transformed my relationship with my husband without even knowing. But I owe her so much from one comment she made. So I will be sure that we talk about that comment, and it'll be interesting to see if this may transform your relationships with people. And so it'll be great to have her on the show next week. And we have some exciting news coming up. So keep on the Facebook page, on our email, check your emails, make sure you see those. I just see Helen said Lisa was fabulous, because we know Helen knows Lisa as well. So I'll look forward to seeing you same time next week on Spectrum TV. So until then, stay safe and keep learning.